Hey everyone, today we're going to learn how to play Italian game. Highly recommended, super classical opening. It's very well for beginners. So I'm going to show you a more positional approach, a little slower, and also something more aggressive, a little sharper. So let's get into it. Let's go to the board, how to play Italian game.
In general, in the opening, beginners should stick to the principles: control the center, develop pieces, and castle as soon as possible, and not worry that much about memorizing opening moves. However, it's always very nice when you know you're playing the right variation for you according to your level and according to your style. It's always great to know, for example, where we should break in the middle game, or which are typical weak squares on your opponent's position, or on which wing of the board should we attack or play in the middle game. That's why in this video you will learn how to play Italian game, my favorite opening for beginners. And you might be thinking, okay, but why this opening? And the thing is that this variation is easy to learn, easy to understand, and easy to play for this level, but also there is a very natural and traditional development for our pieces, and something very good is that we can play it with two different approaches. If you want to play it positionally, you can do that with long-term plans, but also if you want to be a little more aggressive and play more dynamically, we can also use this approach. So let's get into it. We have Italian game. After the moves e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then bishop c4. The idea of this move, well, we are developing, we are preparing to castle, we are putting the bishop very active, targeting f7, also controlling the center over here. This is Italian game here. At this point, black can play some options. The two main lines for black are bishop c5 and knight f6. Those are the two best moves for black, but also we can mention some sidelines like a6, like anti-fried lever, and they can try here d6, and they can try here knight d4. These are sidelines we are going to study here just to make sure we know how to play against them, and of course we are going to focus then later on the two main lines bishop c5 and knight f6. If black plays anti-fried lever, this line a6 controlling g5, the idea is that, for example, in our main lines when black plays knight f6, we can play knight g5. That's a variation. So it's very common in beginners to try something like this, so the knight cannot go there anymore. And well, of course, it's working fine to avoid knight g5, but the problem is that this move is not developing. So in general, when your opponent plays this anti-fried lever, what we can do is to try to be aggressive and try to use this extra tempo we have, and also try to use our development advantage. So the way to do that is by breaking in the center. So we can try to play d4 immediately, and it's going to be very well, and we will have a better opening and middle game. But also we can castle and prepare it a little better, like break after we castle, or but like playing c3 and d4 later. And it's also going to be perfect. Either way, we will have the advantage. So that's the best way to play against this line. If they try something different like knight d4, this move is just a trap. They call it like Blackburn Shilling Gambit, and the idea is that black is intentionally hanging. They're forgetting intentionally the pawn on e5. If we capture the pawn, we could be in trouble because black can play queen g5. If we capture here on f7, they can capture here, getting our rook. And if we move the rook, they check, and maybe we need to block, and then they are mating here with the knight on f3. So that's the main idea with this knight d4. Of course, we don't need to get into this line. The right way to play against this tricky variation we can see very often is just knight takes d4, and then some ways to play, but probably d3 is going to be perfect here. This position is going to be very good. We will have two very good bishops, very good control in the center, and also a very good development in this line. And the other side line black can play here is d6. Observe, this move is a little passive. Now the bishop is going to be behind the chain of pawns. At this point we can play something like d4, and again it's going to be very well. We have a really nice position here, a very good middle game. But also if you want to play for a trap, you can try here knight f3, and very often black plays bishop g4 just pinning. We can play a3 here, forcing the bishop to go back to h5. And here we have this legal trap. We can play in this position knight takes e5. And well, here black can play two things, like capture the knight to capture the queen. But if they capture the queen, you have mate in 2, like check and mate. But also, if they capture the knight, like thinking, okay, I'm going to lose the bishop, but also I'm getting another bishop over here. It's not going to be like that. We can just capture the bishop, and when they capture our bishop on c4, we have this check, and then we're getting the knight on c4, so we will have one pawn up. So let's get into the two best moves black can play in this position. They are knight f6 and bishop c5. So after knight f6, here we have some ways to play. For example, d3 is going to be fine. You defend, you develop, and we have a very normal and natural development for the next moves. But there is this line, a little more aggressive, knight g5, that is going to create some more problems for black. Here we are attacking the pawn on f7, so they need to play d5. That's the only move. And here we're going to capture that pawn on d5. Black can try some things here. The best move is going to be knight a5, but also I want to highlight, if they capture the pawn here with the knight, they are getting into fried liver attack. And in general, this position is going to be good for white. We can capture the pawn on f7 and then give a check. And then the idea is that we are also attacking the knight. So probably we are getting the piece back, and if they don't accept that, if they defend, as you can see, the king is very exposed here, so we can continue playing very aggressively, like knight c3. And well, this position is really complicated now. The lines are a little tricky, but in general we can say white is better. For example, here we are getting the knight, and black can play two moves to defend that knight, like knight e7 or knight b4. I'm just going to tell you how to continue. For example, after knight b4, we're going to play king d1, and the idea is that we are playing a3, we're defending the pawn on c2 that was threatened, and also we're clearing e1 for the rook. And well, when I say a3, observe, this knight cannot move, because we're getting the knight on d5, so the position is going to be really good. The compensation is more than enough for white here. But also observe that if the knight goes back to e7, we're gonna play here this surprising move d4. The idea is that we want to open black king there, and if they capture, we can give a check, but first we capture on d5 and then we give the check I was saying. And when the king goes, we capture the pawn first. We're going to capture this knight, but first let's take the pawn, and even if they defend, you have the check again. So when the king goes back to e6, then you can capture the knight. This position is very good for white. Observe, we already have a pawn up. The king is still very unsafe, and well, in general we can say this is decisive advantage for white. So back to this position, a tricky move they can try is b5 here. And the idea is that if we capture that pawn, that seems to be very tempting, then they are getting the pawn on d5, they are targeting here and here, so they have some ideas over there. So in general, the right move here, after this b5, the best move could be this surprising, really hard to find in a game. So this is something we need to understand very well, because it's a move that we probably cannot find in a game. And it is this bishop f1. The idea is that we are defending the pawn on g2, so if the queen takes the pawn on d5, then we can play knight c3, and we don't have to worry about this capture over there. And when the queen moves, for example, we can capture the pawn now on b5. So the main line, and probably the best move for black in this position, is going to be this knight a5. Here we're going to play bishop b5 check, and here black can play two things: block with the bishop, block with the pawn. If they block with the bishop, we just play here queen e2, defending, attacking. This position is very playable for white. Probably we are slightly better. If they block with the pawn, we are going to trade, and we are going to play this move queen f3. We are pinning because the rook is hanging behind. This position is very unclear, but also very playable. And finally, the most popular move for black in this position, this bishop c5. Here we have some options. For example, just to highlight something, we can play Evans Gambit with b4, very interesting. But the line I want to suggest here is this c3, and black can play here knight f6. And this is the moment where we can try two different approaches. This is what I meant at the beginning of the video. Here, for example, we can play d3, a little more positional play, or we can play d4, a little more aggressive. So just to show you what can happen with this d4, black needs to trade here, so they can give the check over b4, and then we block. This position seems to be great because we have 2 pawns in the center, but now they can capture the pawn on e4 because there is a pin, However, this is fine because we are going to have compensation here. We are going to castle, and this is an interesting line. If they capture the pawn on c3, it's not the best move, but if they do that, just to show you what can happen, then we're going to play here this move queen b3. The idea is that we're attacking f7, but also we're attacking the bishop here, and if they capture the rook, we check, and if they move like to f8, we're going to play bishop g5. This position is already too good. Observe that when the knight goes back to e7, we are going to play like rook e1, and the pressure is too much, and we are getting material advantage and decisive advantage too. The other more positional approach is when we play d3. This is what they call Yuko Pianissimo. And the idea is that we're not breaking right now. We're going to develop our pieces. We're going to castle. We're going to put our pieces in good positions. And then maybe when we are ready in the middle game, we're going to break over d4. Is the mindset with this d3. But also in some positions, we can play over the king side and attack over there and delay a little that break. So just to show you how the line can continue, here black can play d6, we can play a3, and we want to avoid this bishop g4 very often. If you want to play for a trick, you can try a4 in these positions, and if they don't see your threat, we are playing here b4 and a5. That's a nice idea. So this a4 is not like a strong move, but it's a tricky move for blitz and bullets. I think it's going to work very well. So probably the best move is something like a3 to definitely avoid this bishop g4, and black can play here a6. And when black plays a6, they could be trying something like knight a5, because the bishop cannot go to b5 now. So in general, after this a6, which is also very useful because they are clearing that square for their bishop, we should try here bishop b3. So we are not trading our bishop for the knight. Our bishop can escape now to c2 if we need. So black can play here bishop a7, for example, just to make sure we're not playing d4 at some point later and attacking the bishop. And we can castle. Black can play a6 here to avoid our bishop g5, and very often we play knight d2 in these positions. Black can castle. We can play rook e1 here, and this is the idea. We want to clear f1 because we want to maneuver with this knight, so we can develop our queen side, but also our knight is going to be great over g3. So that's the plan. For example, after rook e8, we can play here knight f1, and in the middle game we are playing knight g3. Very often we can use this square for our knights, like knight h4, knight f5. In some positions we want to play bishop e3 because this bishop here on a7 is really active, and sometimes we want to trade those bishops. So depending on what happens on the next moves and how black develops, we could be playing on the king side and try to start an attack over there, also bringing the queen over f3. And the other plan here is to try to break over f4, so once our pieces are in really good positions, we can just play in the center with these ideas of d4. So if you guys have any question, let me know in the comments. Thank you guys, like, subscribe, see you on the next.